meeting to order of the Redevelopment Authority Citizens Committee on March 2nd, 2015. We're at the Community Center, and if you will call the roll, please, Tanya.
Chairperson Hanneman. Vice Chairperson Lapierre. Member Bagwell.
Here.
Member Cardinal.
Here.
Member Muley.
Here.
Member Scheck. Member Wickstead.
Here.
A quorum is present.
Okay, I'd like to take this moment before we go into the agenda to introduce two new members tonight. One is Mr. Court Cardinal to my left. Court, would you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure, thanks, Ronnie. Been a citizen of Carson City for 12 years now. Opened up Casino Fandango and the campus project 12 years ago. Moved here from Reno since then. Like to be active within the community, as you two well know. Also, as a hobby, active racing sports cars, doing a little flying, and that's about it.
Well, that's a lot. Thank you very much. We're glad you're here. Now I'd like to introduce to my right, with the same hair color as I have, Mr. Donald Craig Millay.
Thank you, Ronnie. Yes, I've been in the community for, about 25 years now, and I almost feel like I'm one of the regulars finally. And my background's manufacturing, so I've came up here to do manufacturing, and I've now retired, but I've also, in my time here, I've served on the Planning Commission for 2 terms, was on the Capital Projects Committee to site and build the courthouse and jail, done some wastewater committees and things, so I like to stay involved with the community, and I really wanted to be on this committee just because I was instrumental in the plan for downtown back when we redid the master plan. So I'd like to see it move forward and come to fruition.
Well, Craig, welcome. We know you'll be both of you will be a great addition to this committee. Okay, number 3, public comments. The public is invited at this time to comment on and discuss any topic that is relevant to or within the authority of the Carson City Redevelopment Authority Citizens Committee, including any matter that is not specifically included on the agenda as an action item. Is there any member of the public who would like to come forward now? Seeing none, we will go on to item number 4, which is for possible action, approval of the minutes from January 5th, 2015.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the Carson City Redevelopment Authority Citizens Committee Monday, January 5th, 2015 meeting minutes.
Second.
And all in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Abstain.
Oh,
Those two have to
that's right. Okay, they have to abstain. Okay.
One of a quorum, there's 3.
Yeah.
Madam Chair, if the record could just reflect that the reason they're abstaining is because they were not present during that meeting.
Thank you. So the record will reflect that. Okay, number 5, the agenda items. 5.1, update regarding the approved downtown Carson Street urban design project schedule and discussion only regarding RAC's role as a project design oversight committee. Lee?
Thank you. I'll give a little bit of a brief overview of this presentation, and also tonight here to give you a presentation and talk about the scope of work of the project is Danny Rotter, the city engineer and project manager for the downtown project, and Mike Bennett with Loomis Associates, who is leading the contract work for design for the city. So you're going to have an opportunity to meet them and talk to them a little bit about the design schedule and what will be going on this year, and what the RAC's role will be in the design process. Let me skip ahead when let me start with this, and then I'll go back to kind of more detail of what kind of where in the process we're going to be talking to RAC and what the decision points are going to be. when the Board of Supervisors was developing the project and assigning what they called oversight committees, they approved these 3 bullet points as to what the roles of those committees are. So both the RAC and the Regional Transportation Commission have been assigned as oversight committees of the downtown project, kind of to checkpoints along the way. So it really, the first 2 bullets are kind of the same as to provide a public forum for information and comment on both the design and construction and updates and comment on the project budget as it goes forward. So as we go back to the schedule, as we come back to RAC, we'll provide check-in points to let you know where we are in terms of both design and budget. Secondly, or thirdly, as you will, the RAC and RTC are to provide recommendations to the board regarding final design elements. And as the schedule notes, for RAC, that's tentatively scheduled for July, September, and November in 2017. We just had a kickoff meeting this morning with the design team and a lot. So this is the schedule that's up here on the screen is the schedule that was presented and approved by the board with the contract. Still working out the details, and as I said, just had the kickoff meeting. So while some of these dates might not be as precise, this should be for the purposes of this meeting. This is kind of just a little bit of a high-level schedule for discussion. They have a more detailed schedule. There's obviously, in your packet, you have the complete scope of work for the contract. So there's all the sub-tasks that are within there. So if you have any questions on those, the team's here to answer questions. And I think at this point, what I'd like to do is have either Danny or Mike come up and tell you a little bit more. Maybe, do you want to start, Danny, and then introduce Mike? Okay, go with that. Thank you.
Good evening, Chair, Commissioners. My name's Danny Rotter. My parents moved here when I was 3 years old, and so when I say where I'm from, I say Carson City. So I know this project has had a lot of different voices, a lot of different opinions, but my marching orders are to get it done, and that's what I'm going to do. We've got Mike here to answer any questions. I know he'd love to tell you his history in Carson City, but we're generally here to just introduce ourselves, show you where we're headed, provide a kind of a roadmap there, and then get down to it. So.
Thanks, Danny. Good evening, board. My name is Mike Bennett. I'm a location principal of Loomis & Associates here in Carson. My grandfather moved here in the 50s. My father was born and raised here, and I was born and raised here, graduated Carson High, ultimately got an associate's from WNC, finished my bachelor's of science in civil engineering at UNR. I can't tell you how thrilled I am to be part of this. My family still lives here. My in-laws live here. I get all sorts of interest at home talking about it. People on the street know that I'm a part of it. So we're just thrilled to be a part of it.
And you're also a leadership grad.
I am that as well. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So if you have any questions for me on anything, that's...
Yeah, so maybe just to wrap it up. So, as I mentioned, there's some decision points along the way. So generally, as I don't think RAC is as familiar with engineering projects as these guys are, and they assume everybody knows what 30% design is and 60% design. But you can kind of imagine that 30% design is kind of a rough. It's kind of the first level of design, and as you get higher towards 100%, that's more detailed. 100% being ready to go to construction. So the plan is to, just a couple points in here that I'll point out where there's some decision points. The first public meeting is scheduled for mid-April. The 14th has been tentatively scheduled. That might change, but that's going to be a public workshop, trying to get some space here at the community center, and that's going to be a theming workshop. So before they get into more detailed design, as you can imagine, kind of have some theme choices to get some public feedback on to move forward with some more detailed design. 30% design is scheduled to be completed in June. And the first RAC meeting to come back and get a recommendation from RAC on the design is after that 30% design is done. So you'll have some plans to look at, some design features to look at, and in July you'll be making a recommendation regarding that 30% design, which then is going to go to to the Board of Supervisors for action to proceed from that. Then really the next, then they go to 60% design, and again, that's just another level of design, more design coming back to the RAC in September for, again, really just a checkpoint at that point, because it doesn't go back to the supervisors until 90% design in November, so there's another meeting, and then with RAC in November to make recommendations on the design elements at that point. So again, they haven't put anything down on paper yet. You know, there's the concepts that Danny's been given his marching orders on, and they've developed the contract with. But this is we're just kicking off the meeting, and I really just wanted to include them in this to have you a chance to meet the team that's going to be doing this throughout the project and coming back to you. And if you have any general questions on the process and the scope of work, this might be an opportunity to ask them. So I'll conclude with that.
I think, Lee, I'll make one more point. The 30% and the 90% are going to the board. So the things that are going to go with that is a cost estimate. And one of the things we talked about in depth as we started moving forward is seeing this project going forward as CMAR, Construction Manager at Risk, which helps bring a contractor on for pre-construction services to help get a true value for what we're designing, so we can stay within our budget and more importantly also limit the impacts to the business owners downtown by having the contractor in ahead of time and say, hey, if you build it this way, you tweak that a little bit, I can build this first and do that next, do a wood sidewalk or however it works, to have that contractor on early. And so we think we'll have a general idea when we get to the 30%, and we'll be refining that as we go along. So the 30% and the 90% we want to take to the board to make sure that here's where we're at, here's where we're going, and show the costs of our estimates.
Laura, you had a comment?
Yeah, can you help walk me through a process up there? So the theming workshops are tentative for April the 14th. And then the public open house is in June, and then the RAC doesn't get till July. So I'm trying to understand, from the theming workshop, are you getting general consensus and then utilizing that for the 30% design and then taking that? I'm just trying to get the difference between the theming workshop and how, because previously RAC got to look at it from the theming and before you went into your 30%. So why are we not looking at it from in between the theming and the public open house?
Well, in answer to your question on the theming workshop, the intent of that is the city has given the design team charge that we need to include the public in what ultimately this project looks like. So the intent of the theming workshop is to present different color palettes, different material palettes, different furniture ideas, if you will, benches and whatnot, to the public, and have them provide input back to the design team as to what you guys want to see the downtown look like. So this is happening. We haven't formalized concepts yet of where the parking stalls are, or where the plaza pedestrian, or the pedestrian plazas are. What the theming is for is to give us, the design team, information on what this downtown is going to look like, how it's going to lay out, and then we will take that information and start to develop the actual 30% plans from it. Did I answer your question?
At the time of the theming workshop, so we had a little bit of discussion about this. So in mid-April, they're not going to have plans for the full length of Carson Street at that time. So it's not going to be 30% design that they're looking at, but it's going to give them some direction. So what the plan is to wrap up all those options and alternatives that are presented at the theming workshop and the 30% design in the public workshop and those comments, and bring that to RAC and say, here's what we heard from the public, here's the direction we heard and what was developed as a result of that, and get your input and recommendations to then go forward. That is that an accurate representation? So
I think another
and again, you're welcome to participate in the theming workshop too. I mean, everybody's going to get invited. That's public, open, but Yeah, I guess, is that, how much of a decision point is that really in April, I guess is the
Well, I
question.
guess what I want to be clear on is the theming workshop is not, it is different than our interaction with the local businesses. So that will be happening independent of that theming workshop. The theming workshop is intended for the public in general to be able to come in, even though they don't have property that abuts the project, to come in and say, this is the concept that I want to see for my downtown, because it's taxpayer money.
Cart, you have a comment?
Yes, thank you. Just a quick question. At what point are you starting the value engineering on the project?
Today.
It seems to me that it's a little backwards in my mind, where you're doing, if you're starting it early and then having...
If you're starting it early and then having the theming workshop, isn't that going to be integral and part of your value engineering process, or?
I would say no. And the reason why I say that is because it's going to be the theming workshop is going to give us some design principles to follow that the public wants to see, different elements that they want to see in the downtown. The value engineering comes from our interactions with the CMAR contractor and saying, you know, if you use a different type of oil in the asphalt, I can save 5% on the cost of oil. That's the value engineering proposition that will happen outside of the public, independently of the public.
I guess I understand that, but if the theming comes to whether they want wooden sidewalks or concrete stamped sidewalks or, you know, whatever the material may be, it seems to me that that would also become part of the value engineering process, because it's going to be a big difference whether you're doing stamped concrete or wood.
Well, there won't be.
As an example, or which bench styles they want.
That's a good example, but I want to follow that up, and it wouldn't be a stamped concrete versus wood. It would be a stamped concrete maybe versus pavers. And we're going to have to fit with what the budget allows. More what we're looking for is we want to see this type of color palette. We'd like to see pavers in there if we can. If we can't make pavers fit from a budget standpoint, then we're going to try to simulate that look with stamped concrete.
And another point too is we should have a CMAR contractor on board, I think probably the beginning to middle of May. And so after we've gotten that theming workshop with comments as the feel, kind of the artistic side. I'm a left brain, give me a straight line and pour that curb. But when we get those comments on the theme and some of the designers on board to get that, they come back from that and start to develop the actual 30% plan. So when they're laying it down and they're saying, can we really afford this type of theme and how can we make that fit? They're already taking that first shot at value engineering of making that fit that number from their thoughts and the designing and bouncing ideas off the contractor. So that when we get to the 30% design, they've already had those discussions. They've already said, hey, this would be the best construction way to do it. It'd look a little nicer if you added this. So that when we have the 30% and we have a cost estimate that goes with that, we've already taken a first cut at matching up to the budget. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Go ahead, Greg.
Follow up on that, because I had a note here about that very same thing. In our schedule, on page 1 of the backup information, it actually shows a May 4th meeting as an update to the theming workshop. Now, I had a question, is that just going to be staff presented, or are you folks going to be there to represent, to give us some of that input?
Yeah, I put that on there because I listed all the RAC meetings, and as we're going to discuss later, RAC is going to have a meeting on that date. So I planned on providing an update. That's not a decision point in this, but I just planned on providing an update on the progress at that point.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, because it didn't show up on their timeline, and yet it was in our schedule. So I assumed that it was just going to be a staff presentation.
So at the theming workshop, you're indicating that's a public opportunity to pick color palettes or whatever. How are you going to run that? Is it they're going to put dots on the ones they like and the one with the most dots or something like that from the public that attends versus the business owners? So how are you reconciling that? The business owners just pick blue and the public picks gray.
I think as you're I think what you're alluding to, is there a different weighting given to the business owners versus the public? Honestly, I don't think we've.
No, I think probably when Mike was talking about the business owner outreach, it's more if we put a parking, later on as we move along, if we put a parking stall here and here, how is that going to affect your business for loading and that sort of thing, rather than saying, what are your thoughts for this block? You know, we're not doing a block by block design on what each business owner and property owner thinks. I think we're going to take collectively the design comments, and we still have to work out some of those details specifically because we just had the kickoff meeting. But I don't see there being a huge differentiator in colors, if you will. I think we're going to take a broad approach to everybody's comments, take every comments into consideration. More the operational type stuff will be each business as we go along, and if one business needs to have water from here to here for when they prepare food in the morning, or those types of interactions with the business owners.
I think you have to rein it in also. We went through a charrette, was that 2002, or sometime, and I mean, it was all over the spectrum. So some people want a very simple, others want the Taj Mahal downtown. So you're really going to have to narrow focus it, and I think that's what you were trying to get to within the budget. This is what we're going to be doing. And I have another question for you, probably Lee. Are you going to be working at all with Arts and Culture and Historic Commission on this? Because it is the downtown, and this is very important for both of those to weigh in somehow. We've got the RTC, but we don't have two other major components that really should be looking at this.
Yeah, and again, I'm trying to remember, we had some discussion about how art gets involved with this. I think there was even some discussion with the contract about how we have those discussions, and it may not be that, let me be clear, I don't think we're saying that a portion of the project's not going to pay for art necessarily at this time, but in the part of the design consideration is going to be maybe it's reserving space for that future art pieces or whatever that is. I think that's a good point. I don't know that I have an answer right now how we're going to get to the Cultural Commission, other than Parks and Rec is part of the city team that's working on this, and they're the ones that are connected with the Cultural Commission. So I think they'll get involved somehow.
Yeah, to follow up on that, my understanding, and Danny, jump in if I'm wrong, but my understanding is there isn't funding right now for art. So what we've been charged to do is to provide space for future art. And if there's some grant funding that comes along the way that will allow for that, then it can become part of this project. But as of right now, what we're doing is planning for a future location where art can be located, or a theme that art may fit into. But as of right now, we're not getting the art involved. But if we did, then yeah, I mean, we would need to reach out to those.
But it's a good point, because they need to be involved, even for that location and designing for it.
Yes.
They need to have input through the process to get those things in the right location. So.
And as well as the Historical Commission, because, I mean, much of downtown where you are going to be, focusing is the historic district on both sides, not just the west side. There is some historic on the east side as well with the Capitol and all. And I think they have to come in, because I just tell you, this city has not done a good job at all with keeping the history alive and tearing down things in favor of new. So I think they really need to look at it as well. Lori?
Lee, potentially what you could do is just send specific invitations to HRC and the Cultural Commission to attend the July 6th RAC meeting to give any input in the design from their perspective that they could do on public comment. So they specifically know there's an opportunity for their end to be heard or discussed, and it's in a public forum, and they can just come up to the podium and bring some perspectives and look at the designs with us. to try and, like you said, even though there may not be some money, but at least they can say, no, don't put a piece of art on the west side because the sun will ruin it or something like that. But maybe we could just invite them specifically at our July meeting.
Yeah, thank you for this, Jess. At a minimum, we'll do that. And, you know, this is not to say that we're not going to include other things. I mean, we know these are important. You and RTC are on here because you identified the board specifically to do this, but we're aware that perhaps the State Historic Preservation Office may be a player before this is over, as we do construction up to some of the historical properties, and which will involve the Historic Resources Commission. So, yeah, we're aware that we need to keep them updated, if not specifically involved even.
I feel that once we get to this point, whether it's 30, 60, or 90%, we got to do it right this time.
We agree. We couldn't agree more.
Any other comments? Okay, Craig?
Coming in as the new, just trying to catch up here and get up to speed. And I know this whole concept has already been approved by the board. But as we look at this design, is there any opportunity to discuss, even though we've come to an agreement that we're going to have 3 lanes, 2 traffic and 1 turn lane, of possibly, since 80% of our commercial properties on the west side of the street and the east side is dominated by Capitol, City Hall, the Nugget, that if those 3 lanes were to shift to the east and look at the comparison of parking spaces if we went diagonal on the west side instead of parallel on both, I've just seen so many examples where diagonal works so well, and if it's at a proper angle, it is really easy to get in and out of without disturbing traffic. I mean, it really minimizes the amount of interruption. And to park in front of the Capitol, I'm not sure that they even want us parking in front of the Capitol. So to take advantage of the other side of the street to the, because like Ronnie said, we've got one shot at this thing. And, my personal opinion would be 2 lanes, because I've just seen too many examples where you don't need that left turn lane. But we're beyond that at this point. So, but I still would like maybe just a quick, as you're designing, say, oh God, we could have twice as many parking places if we did them diagonal on one side only. I don't, the other thing is, if the businesses then want to come in for a special permit use to include seating further out, like we've seen in some communities, they actually use part of the diagonal parking space in front of their shop and put up seating, and it's got flower boxes or whatever to protect it. Mm-hmm. And I don't think you would gain enough if it's only parallel parking.
Yeah, I'll address that because I could just tell you the direction that the consultants have been given is not to look at that. So I don't, answering for them, I don't think they plan on looking at that. But that's not to say that hasn't been looked at. I mean, that was we got comments on that throughout. We're working with engineering and looking at the right-of-way. And the problem with angled parking, unless you go to the 2 lanes, you lose so much sidewalk on one side or another, then you're not gaining much anymore in the benefits of sidewalk, and there's really not much point in extending them, because actually that angle parking, it takes up about 2 lanes worth of pavement. So yes, we looked at that. We tried to see how that could work, but that's not a scenario that they're going to explore in the design. And that's not a scenario they're going to explore. Although you brought up in front of the Capitol, there's still discussions with the Capitol. So that's where there's actually some extra right-of-way, because there aren't businesses there. So depending on how discussions with the state goes, there may be some opportunities for parking there while they're not in the legislature, although those discussions are ongoing.
Are you now trying to work this out by the way you've reconstructed the parking on Curry Street? You know, behind, in front of the old City Bank building, because it was diagonal both ways on both sides, and now it's diagonal on one side and it's parallel on the other.
What's the question?
I think that was just a.
If you're experimenting on that right now. No?
I think that was just a spacing issue when we had a couple instances with trucks trying to get in there and different parking scenarios. One of the, between operations and transportation and engineering, we got together and decided that that would be a better solution there. It was also an opportunity to see something different there, to see how that worked out. So, but I think it was more this is probably a better fit for right here.
Because it's been that way for so many years, and all of a sudden, it's changed. So I thought maybe that was part of the experiment, you know, to see whether it's going to work or not.
Yeah.
Okay, any other comments from the board? If not, public can weigh in at any time. And with no further public or board comments, then we don't have to take action on this, so we'll go to 5.2 for possible action. Oh, thank you, I'm sorry. Sorry, thank you very much. For possible action to change the RAC regular meeting schedule from once a month to meeting at least quarterly, provided that redevelopment staff, the chair, or majority of the committee may call special meetings in any month as necessary to address RAC business matters. Lee?
Thank you, Bonnie. And I put this on the agenda at the chair's request to discuss this, and rightly so. I mean, over the last month or couple years, you know, we do cancel a lot of meetings. You probably put it on your calendars for monthly, but then we don't have items to discuss, and it can be frustrating a couple months in a row getting cancellation notices without really knowing when the next meeting's going to be. So the suggestion was brought up to schedule regular meetings quarterly, so four times a year. And I suggested, so based on our schedule and policies of when special events are permitted, and kind of ties in with when the budget information is presented, that we always have a meeting in May. So using that as kind of the anchor point, if you'd go every 3 months, you would have meetings in February, May, August, and November. And that kind of gives us time too, and as I note in the staff report, even sometimes when somebody asks for something to be on the agenda, it's usually not going to be the next month because I'm already in a couple weeks preparing materials for that meeting. So, I mean, I think this is a good solution. The Historic Resources Commission does something similar. They have regularly scheduled meetings every other month, but if there's an application they need to review in that in-between month, we schedule it and have the meeting, and that seems to work out pretty good. Like on the previous item, the schedule, we have meetings scheduled with RAC in between these. So we would still have those meetings in addition to those, and we can work on the schedule. So this was brought up for discussion, and I think, you know, I think it's up to you as the members. I mean, we can continue to have them scheduled for every month and then not have them, but I kind of don't like taking up all of your time to not have something really to chew on and really make it a meaningful meeting. So perhaps this is a good idea.
Any comments?
I like the idea of going to a quarterly agenda so that we have true action items instead of just reporting or updates. I'd prefer that we only have meetings because we have action items. So I also think it's more efficient use of the city staff time. And I'll be honest, my own personal time that we can schedule these. And so I like the idea of going to the quarterly, unless again, we'll have a July special one this time to meet the conditions of the downtown streetscape project, so.
Well, personally, Lee, I think it's a great idea. It gives more meat to the committee as well, and know that they are going to be meeting. So any further comments?
I think it's a fine plan. I mean, we can, like you said, it's flexible, so we could put another one in there if something does come up. But I'm with Ronnie that staff, you folks are getting spread thinner and thinner. And so I feel it's a good idea, too.
I just have a question about that, Lee. Is it highly likely that any special scheduled meetings will still be on a Monday, or would they be just anywhere in the week?
Yeah, that's a good point. What we would do is reserve this room for the first Monday of each month, so that, because actually scheduling this room is the toughest thing. So we don't want to lose that schedule in case things come up. So if we do have a meeting on an in-between month, it'll still be the first Monday of the month.
Yeah, then in my opinion, it's entirely fine to go to that route. I think it's a good idea. I think it gives, like some of the other members said, meat to the meetings, and I'm all for it. I really don't think it's not going to be that much more of a stretch to the other meetings, just being that we're shortening the available time. So.
Exactly, and this is what the caveat anyway, that these are the regularly scheduled meetings with other meetings as needed. So, I mean, we could meet monthly for all we know, but no less, or, no less than 4 times a year. So I think that's important. I'm willing to entertain a motion. Court?
I move to adopt a policy that the Redevelopment Authority Citizens Committee will meet at least quarterly, provided that redevelopment staff, the chair, or majority of the committee may call special meetings in any month as necessary to address RAC business matters.
Okay. Second?
I'd like to second the motion.
Call for the vote? Aye. Okay, so moved. Unanimous. Okay, on the non-action items, we are now at 5.5-36, staff reports and update on matters relating to the RAC. Lee, you're on again.
Yeah, just to mention one thing besides future agenda items, I have direction to take an item or I'm working with Karen about, the Redevelopment Authority Chair, has given direction to get with Nick to kind of take an item to the Board of Supervisors regarding RAC policy direction or priorities, and to have the board give some direction of what the expectations of RAC are, how RAC can help implement the goals and policies of the city strategic plan. I'm not sure kind of what form that's going to take. It's not something that's scheduled yet, but I just wanted to let you know I'm working on that. So that's the kind of thing that over a longer period in between meetings where we might have something to talk about in a couple months. Which brings me to the future agenda items. So I think with the schedule as adopted and the next kind of items we had anyway would be in May. We're accepting the special event applications due by mid-April. We bring those to RAC at the first meeting in May. Then they go to the board in June. So the meeting in May will have special events, and that's also by that time we'll have some budget information regarding the redevelopment budget to bring to you, and have Nick come in and give a presentation on that. And that's all I have to report.
Okay, thank you. And I'm looking forward to hearing, the policy direction as well. I think that's very critical for us. So, because we've been sort of a little bit rudderless, and it would be nice to have some kind of a rudder. So this is a good thing. Okay, item B is future agenda items for the next RAC meeting.
Yeah, so I mentioned so unless you have, so the 2 items I have for sure are special events. We'll have Nick Providenti come and give the budget update. And as I mentioned in the first item, we'll give you an update on I'll give you a little bit of a report on the downtown workshop at that point. That was kind of my plan to do that.
Go ahead, Laura.
So, Lee, when you're working to bring us back some items on direction and priorities and things, before you actually do the applications on these special events, is there an opportunity to discuss the methodology for special event funding before we put the applications out?
Let's discuss that.
Okay, I'd like to discuss that.
We need to, that's part of what we need to take to the board, so
Okay.
if we can.
That would be great.
Okay,
Thank you.
thanks.
Anyone else have any future agenda items? Go ahead.
I don't know that this would be a future agenda item, but I'd like, and Lee, I don't know what the historic point of this is, but on this. But if you look at the two development plans, both of them speak of funding that can go beyond just our tax incentives, the incremental tax on property taxes. And has there ever been any effort to go out and look for grant monies and this could become an item for the agenda if we started discussing what monies are out there, how we can get some of them to maybe sweeten the pot and start moving forward on some other areas within the two districts by either federal money, state money, outside grant money, even talking about the arts, some of that grant money. I think there's monies available out there that, but we need to make an effort to go find them.
Yeah, staff is always looking for, you mentioned the arts, and I know the Parks and Rec, they're always looking for those types of grant opportunities. In fact, with the downtown project, there's a grant opportunity that kind of came through our office a couple weeks ago that we've, in talking with the consultant, they have some grant experts that we're going to be looking at that where it seems like what we're doing fits in that. So we're going to be going after that grant. So it is something we look at, and if it's something we can bring to RAC, I mean, I'm happy to do that. If there's any, especially if there's any action RAC can take to help further that. I mean, often those things come through city staff. They get we're just on a list and we get emails of all these different grants are available. So we have to watch for those and watch for ones that we can apply for and are applicable to our what we're doing and we qualify for and all of that stuff. So I'm not sure how having an item with RAC can help, but if there's anything we need to bring to RAC that helps an application, we certainly would do that.
Yeah, I just didn't know if we go out and say, oh, here's some grant money, but it only works for this type of a project, and then we look and say, can we make one of these fit in as one of those projects? I'm not sure if we can, say, okay, a blighted area or, whatever it might be. I just don't. So I thought I'd go on and do some quick research just on grant funding for redevelopment, kind of just make it a broad search and see what might be out there. And a couple of other quick items. Right now, I think we have an opportunity, and I don't see this, in my opinion, when the Redevelopment Authority, we should be getting involved, whether it's just in encouraging projects or opportunities to happen by maybe showing people how they would benefit by doing a redevelopment. And one comes to mind for me is the horseshoe. And I'm saying, okay, right now we are going to redo downtown and the building is for sale. And I'm saying, okay, as a group or as a board rep or somebody, go to the owner and the agent and say, we feel as a city it'd be beneficial if you market it as a commercial property as opposed to a casino, which the whole gaming industry has really taken a hit lately. Unless you have other venues, entertainment, hotel, or something, they're all struggling if it's strictly gaming. And here's a building that would really fit well in this project if it got redeveloped, you know. So I don't know if there's any kind of nudging or any kind of encouragement we can do as a board.
Court?
I think that's a good idea. I think the one thing with regards to that specific entity is you got to remember there's an unrestricted gaming license that's associated with that too, which is worth a ton of money. So to market that as just a property and not a casino property, as the owner, you'd probably take a huge loss on that. Just not that I'm opposed to less slot machines in the area, but you know, there's that there too. But I think what your point is very well taken.
Can those rights be transferred or moved to a different location? I'm not, you know, I don't understand all the gaming rules. I just know that, anymore to get a what do you call it, a general or a wide open one, you know, you have to have rooms.
There's a room requirement, exactly.
Unless you were grandfathered in, and so I'm sure that their license unrestricted is worth quite a bit of money, but could that be sold separately and moved to a different location?
There's a lot of different restrictions with regards to that, but there's always possibilities to look at something.
If we could take this discussion
before we debate, we're off. This is not for debate here. It's kind of for questions, but kind of to both of your last points on grants and other opportunities. That goes, both of those points go back to getting policy priority from the Board of Supervisors. What's the direction? In other words, there may be grants available that run through us to do some sort of project that requires some match, but if that's way down on the city's priority list for the type of project that we want to do, we probably don't want to spend a lot of time chasing that money. So I think that's where it goes back to getting some policy priorities from the board so that we can take that to identify the things that we need to do and where we need to look for money to do those priority things. So
also, let me just say that they have been working very hard to free up some money within the redevelopment budget. So I think we really need to look at that as well. Chris, you had.
Thank you, Ronnie. Yes, the other thing I was thinking, looking quite a ways ahead, there's a few in the city that would like to look at how the southern corridor will change once the freeway is put in. And I don't necessarily think of this for a short-term meeting, but longer term, we probably want to start thinking about some of that. I know I have some thoughts and ideas on some areas around in the development area too, which are going to be near the freeway, and I'd be curious to know some things. I can probably talk to Lee offline or whatever about those, but something to think about for long-term.
And I think overall on the priority list, the corridors are sort of down, you know, to the bottom, not to the bottom, but they're down when you're thinking about the animal shelter and the MAC and then the downtown. So we've got some time for that. So I think the critical thing right now that people are wanting is some oversight as it relates to the downtown. So it's just not, even though the Board of Supervisors has the final say, they would feel more comfortable, I think, having other people weigh in as well. Any further comments? Okay, I don't see a lot of public out there, so I don't think we're going to have any public comments. So I will entertain a motion for adjournment. Second? All in favor?
Aye.
So we are adjourned at 6:20 p.m.